الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Center at New York University podcast, coming to you straight from the heart of New York City. We're building an amazing Muslim community here at ICNYU where everyone is welcomed and respected no matter where you're from or where you're at. This is the place to be. So open your ears and your heart and come along with us on another life-changing journey. Bismillah.
Okay. Bismillahi walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wayassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone. Good to see you all. So today we're going to continue with barriers. Last week we started with talking about barriers to spiritual growth, emotional growth, any kind of transformation that we want to achieve. Does anyone remember some of the barriers that we talked about last week? Perfectionism, that was huge, yeah. Anybody else? I don't want to keep looking, putting pressure on the sisters, so I keep going like this. Yeah. Anxiety, absolutely. Well, how we navigate anxiety, right? Not necessarily that anxiety is a barrier, but how we navigate anxiety. I think I touched briefly on, did I touch briefly on people pleasing? I think towards the end, right? Yeah. So I want to first open it up to a little bit of reflection and get you to, or encourage you to kind of reflect on your own life and what you think some of the barriers to your own growth are. And I just want to start with that. That way also when I'm speaking to specific issues that come up for you guys. And of course you can share as much as, or not share if you're not comfortable, but let's just take a minute and think about some of the things you're trying to accomplish in your own life, and what are some of the barriers that come up that keep you from seeing the changes that you want? Yeah.
Last week you were speaking about specifically related to it being like childlike, and them not caring about the truth.
Right.
And I think you asked us to reflect on that for a moment. Like make a note of that.
Yeah.
And I noticed how subtle it can be, the thing that's like, nah, I'm not going to do that the first time. And the second time it's like, well, and the third time it's like, I don't know, it's not that, and then eventually, for the most part, there weren't any like major, setbacks, but there were several times where it was just like, how did this thing start as like not a possibility, and over time become like so close to being something I did.
So are you talking about something like positive you're trying to achieve, or something that you were trying to avoid? Exactly. And how in the beginning you're like, oh, I would never do that. Idea. That's a terrible idea. And then how it becomes normalized, right?
And it seems almost like to not do it would be dumb.
Right, subhanAllah. I love that you brought that example, because I think that just shows you, also shaitan plays a role in this as well, right? Yeah. But it's good that we also take into account the role that our nafs plays. And that's the thing, like, I feel like, and I speak about this a lot, we live in a time where it's easy to just normalize things and easy to be desensitized, where it's like, oh, it's not a big deal eventually. But when you do this work on yourself, you realize how sensitive your heart is. And the more you do this work, the more you will be able to catch yourself earlier. So you'll be like, and it's the fact that you were able to actually catch yourself is really powerful. But I think the more you do this work, you'll be able to catch yourself earlier. But that's the nature of the heart too. The heart and the nafs, like, they're impacted by each other. And so the more that you feed your nafs and you give into your nafs, and this is your lower self, this is your ego-containing self, the part of you that doesn't care about truth, the part of you that just cares about instant gratification and comfort seeking and just, feeling good at the expense of what you actually need to grow. Every time you feed into this nafs, the heart gets deprived. And it doesn't actually get a chance to grow. It doesn't actually get a chance to thrive. And so when we understand how fragile this heart is and how sensitive, it's very powerful, it's very strong, but it's also very sensitive. And it comes from its nature. The word qalb, it comes from a nature that the word itself is related to muqallib, right? Something that flips. And this is how the heart is. It will flip in the direction, it easily can flip into a direction that you take it, and you have to pay attention to the direction in which you direct your heart. If you are led by your nafs, then that's where your heart is going to look to. Okay, it's going to look to the nafs to guide it. If you direct the heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is why we say, Ya muqallib al-qulub, oh flipper of hearts, guide my heart. Flip this heart towards you. Because that's what once the heart now is directed towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the nafs can have no voice. That's why sincerity is so powerful, because my teacher used to always say that ikhlas is so powerful because the nafs gets no share. And it means that when you do something purely for the sake of Allah and your heart is fixated on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't give the nafs any share of the reward of what you're doing or what you're seeking, that's when your heart grows. And you could try this in your life. Recognize when there's that battle. You want to do something for the sake of Allah. You want to do something purely for Him, only caring for His reward, only caring for Him seeing you, only caring for Him being the one that rewards you. And notice those moments that the nafs tries to creep up. Oh, but I can also get this from doing that. I can also benefit this way. I can also, gain this reward with the people. And the nafs starts to kind of, it's like, I want a share of this, I want a share of this. And you say, nope, I'm not going to do it for any of those reasons. Like, for example, you plan to go to the masjid, right? And initially, you want to go for the sake of Allah. But you also, let's say you're tired. And then you start to think, well, they do have food there. They're they're serving iftar. And you start to think all the ways that you can benefit by going to the masjid other than prayer. Your nafs wants a share. Now, subhanAllah, you will go, but to give your nafs a share. But when you say, no, I'm going for Allah alone. And that's the beauty of intentions, is that in any time, we have the power to redirect. We have the power to elevate our intentions. We have the power to say, I know I could get all of this. I know that I could benefit. I know that maybe if I go, people will say, this person's so righteous, or this person is so, pious or religious. Or maybe if I go, I'm going to benefit from this worldly gain. But you know what? Ya Allah, my greatest want is you being pleased with me. So at any moment, you can filter out the other intentions. So it's not about perfection. It's about, getting to a place where you are giving more victories to your heart over your nafs. You are winning more battles for your heart over your ego. You're saying, I nourish this heart more than I nourished this ego today. And that's when you really truly feel at peace. You will never feel at peace if you are nourishing your ego the most. If you're nourishing this lower self the most, you'll never feel at peace, because we are not designed to be led from that place. And so be careful when you are becoming desensitized to things that are not good for your heart, that are not good for your soul. Be careful when you're trying to justify things that, or minimize their effect on you. Like, it's not so bad, or it's okay if I, just do this today. No, everything adds up, and before you know it, you may find, and this is what's happening in our world. Now it's like before, it used to be that you didn't have to debate about basic things that are haram and halal. And now we do, right? And so, subhanAllah, it's very easy over time for the heart to become desensitized and the nafs to be the lead, and without any limitations. Okay, so the nafs. So great first start. Anything else come up for you guys about barriers that might interfere with your spiritual growth, your emotional growth, or your healing or transformation?
Like wanting to do everything perfect.
What do you say?
Wanting to do everything perfect.
Wanting to do everything perfect. Mm-hmm.
I feel like yourself, or what you want to do in life
Mm-hmm.
in general, like you want things a certain way. I think you mentioned that last time.
Yeah, that's a big
Like,
one though. I mention it a lot because of that reason.
Yeah, how like we want things a certain way,
Yeah.
and then when it doesn't happen, we just
Mm-hmm.
break down, or like we drift from the path that we
Yeah.
pursue.
Yeah.
There's many ways.
Yeah, and I think I don't mind revisiting it again, because I think it's a big one for a lot of people. For example, a person will get back on track with salah, with prayer, and then they'll miss fajr, for example. Then they'll feel so disheartened. I hear this all the time. I was on track, I was doing so well. But then, and when I track back when they fell off, it's like one thing that fell off. It's like one thing, and that made them feel so less than, and made them feel like everything else they did doesn't matter, and it's okay to throw in the towel, right? It's okay to throw in all the other salahs, which is interesting, right? Like, we won't, if you look at that from a rational perspective, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to sabotage your progress, or to look at progress that you made as insignificant just because you had one setback or you made one mistake. And I believe this is why it's so important to access the name of Allah Ash-Shakur, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of his names is the most appreciative. And he has so much appreciation for the tiniest effort we put forth towards him. And this is something really important to access, because when we give up so easily, when we let one setback, affect our efforts, when we let one mistake keep us from going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for weeks and months after that. I speak to people all the time who, even perfection with their expectation of Allah. Well, I made dua specifically for this, and I was so perfect. I woke up for tahajjud. I speak to people all the time who say the same issue, where there was a period in my life, I spoke with someone recently who was telling me, he was describing how a few years ago he was, on top of his prayers, woke up for tahajjud, made dua all the time, did all of these things, and then he doesn't feel like he doesn't do those things anymore, and he's not in that place anymore. And so I asked him one question. I said, was there something that you were making dua for during that time? And he said, yeah. How did you know that? And I said, because the only reason that someone would give up on doing what they were doing is if they didn't get what they were hoping from that thing. We as human beings, were driven by needs, and we're driven by value. And he said, you're right. I was expecting a certain dua to be answered, and when it didn't, I lost my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so many people don't even want to admit where they're at with Allah, because they think admitting that is what's bad. But as I always say, Allah already knows. So you might as well accept where you're at, so you can actually work on it, so you can actually heal that relationship and get back to where you were, or move forward, right? And so even perfection in what we're expecting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course Allah is the most perfect, but having a very rigid, perfect, expectation, ya Allah, this should happen. And when it doesn't, this happens to so many people. I lost my faith in Allah. I lost my trust in Allah. And this affects, of course, why would you want to connect with someone you don't trust? Think about this. It makes perfect sense. This is why I like to look at the psychology behind our spiritual experience, because it's not as simple as I lost Iman. It's not as simple. I don't like these black and white or absolute way to describe the spiritual experience. Because people will say this, I just don't have Iman, or I just have a bad heart, or, I lost faith. No, it could be something else. Maybe you lost trust. And that's, of course, an aspect of faith. But I think when you break things down, you get to see what fell off. You get to see what it is that really affected you. And it makes sense, because if you can't trust someone, you wouldn't want to connect with them. Think about all relationships. If you lose trust in your spouse, or you lose trust in a friend, wouldn't your desire to connect with them be lesser? Absolutely. And so with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many people have defined in a perfect way, back to your point on perfection, many people have defined in a very perfect way how Allah should answer their dua, and what and when they should receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when that doesn't happen, they feel like their trust is broken with Allah. But really, they weren't trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were trusting in their perfect image for themselves, their perfect rigid expectation for themselves. And so that's where it changes for the person. Oh wow, it's not that I lost trust in Allah. I actually wasn't trusting in Allah to begin with. I said, Allah, this is what I want, make it happen. And I say it that way, and I know it sounds like horrible to even think like, maybe we don't say this out loud when we're speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's what we're doing in our behavior, in our actions. When we're making dua, I'm going to be perfect to get this. And this, people get so resentful. Because resentment comes when you give, and you're not getting nourished, and you're not getting what you need. And many people today are resentful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We talk about resentment like in relationships, but many people are resentful with Allah. Ya Allah, I prayed, I wore hijab, I did this, I sacrificed this, you know, and I didn't get what I asked for. And then on top of that, what makes it worse is when they're doing all of these things, and then they see someone who's not doing any of those things, getting everything that they asked for. Doesn't this happen? You see someone who's on the complete opposite end, right? And you're like, that person has everything. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses this in the Quran. In Surah Taha, at the end of Surah Taha, He says, do not look cravingly at what we have given others to enjoy from this world. I don't have the exact ayah in front of me. Let me actually get it, because I love sharing this ayah. I think it's so powerful. Let me get it. Okay. Here. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Taha, and do not, there's different translation actually for the word wala tamuddanna, right? There's different translations for this word, but even subhanAllah, the sounding in Arabic, wala tamuddanna, it's like you're like extending something, right? It's like there's this extension effect within even the word itself, but the translation is do not extend your eyes, or do not look longingly or cravingly, right? Towards that which we have given others to enjoy. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it being but the splendor of this worldly life by which we test them. So this thing that you're looking at, you're looking cravingly at, longingly at, why are they getting this and not me? Allah's saying those things that you're seeing, that you're wishing you had, that you're looking longingly at, I'm testing them by those things. More is not always better. Because everything we are given, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test us with, is going to ask us about. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end of this, وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى, right? And the provision, what I provide, the provision of your Lord is better and more enduring. So what I have to offer you is so much better. But the only way we can truly appreciate that is if we see beyond this temporary world. If all you see is this world, this ayah is not going to affect your heart. If all you see is this world, you're not going to see beauty in this verse. You're not going to even understand the burden it is to be tested by what we have in this world. It changes you when you understand your life does not end in this world. It completely transforms you when you know that your life extends to the akhirah. That in fact your life here on this earth is so small, so insignificant compared to the akhirah. So back to my point is, when you have these rigid expectations and your trust is in that rigidity and is in that perfect plan that you have for yourself, you will always struggle. So instead of, attaching to perfectionism, we attach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His love and goodness towards us. Meaning that I believe in Allah's, good intent towards me. That He wants good for me. That everything He gives me or withholds from me is rooted in His love for me. So then it's like, you have that trust. I trust you. Whatever happens, I trust you. But you cannot trust someone without knowing them. And this is one of the barriers that people have to having tawakkul, is they really don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And their opinion of him is shaped by false, falsehood or false interpretations, misconceptions, things that maybe they have learned through their upbringing, through imbalanced ways of learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe they were taught about Allah in the absence of love, only as someone to, only in the presence of his punishment or his anger. And I see this a lot, where people don't even know what it means to have a loving relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To see that everything that He has commanded us to do or withheld from us is rooted in His love for us. That changes everything. You know how, like, when you trust that someone loves you in any relationship you have, and they make a decision to do something, or let's say like they did something you didn't understand, there's that sakina, there's that tranquility that but I know this person wouldn't hurt me. So I'm sure there's an explanation for this. Whereas if you doubt that that person actually loves you and intends good for you, if something happens that you don't understand in the relationship, what's the first thing you're going to say? Oh, that person doesn't wish good for me, or that person intends ill towards me, or that person doesn't love me. So subhanAllah, the way that which brings me to, another barrier, and it's very related to perfectionism as well, but it's how we view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as someone who's out to get you, someone who's waiting for you to make a mistake so He can punish you, if you view Him as someone who just wants to put you through hardship, then when something happens in your life that is uncomfortable, is hard, you're not going to think, oh, Allah loves me, I know this is good for me. You're not going to have that sakina, you're not going to have that tranquility. You're going to go to a dark place. Why? That why, right? Why is Allah doing this to me? And this is why the questions we ask when we go through struggles are really important. When you ask, for example, why me, you're already putting yourself in a place in the position of receiver of harm. Did I mention this last week? I did? Yeah. So when you say, why me, you're already making the assumption that you're receiving harm. Like, you don't ask why me when you receive something good, right? Like most people don't, right? But I'm talking about the why me in the sense, like, why is this happening to me and not others, right? So when you say that, you're already putting yourself in the position of, there's something wrong with me. I'm receiving not something good. I'm not receiving something good. But when you say, what does Allah have to offer me through this? What is Allah teaching me through this? You already put yourself in a position of receiver of benefit. That Allah only wants good for me, and I'm ready to receive that good. And if He is testing me, that means there is good in it. When you train yourself, and this is a muscle you build, by the way, it's not something that we wake up with. We actually have to work hard on this. And there's no relationship that is more worthy of our efforts than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, than our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how many of us take the time to actually assess what our perceptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are? How do we view Him when we go through difficulty? What do we expect from Him? Are we always expecting that, He's going to send a calamity our way? Imam al-Shafi'i was asked about, like, having a good opinion of Allah or a bad opinion of Allah. And he said it's to always expect that He's going to send you a calamity. And many people live like this, that they expect that they're just waiting to be punished for something. They're waiting for something bad to happen. But imagine if you lived that way in any relationship, and you, like, let's say you always expected a friend to hurt you. Let's say you always expected your spouse to hurt you. Wouldn't we call that relationship toxic, right? Or that's an unhealthy way to go about the relationship. If you're always expecting that person's going to hurt you, your expectation is going to drive your energy. It's going to affect the way you navigate that friendship. It's going to affect the way or that relationship. It's going to affect the way you show up. But we do this with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Hadith Qudsi, I am what my servant thinks of me. And we don't really realize that power. So then we should assess, what do I think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do I think of Allah right now in my life? Let's take all the struggles, like take all the tests you're going through in your life right now. Lay them out. What are my thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is a great exercise to do. Yeah.
Question. So what you just said, how can we balance it with the hadith, I think, in Allah is ahbab and abtala?
Yeah.
Like, how can we...
Yeah, that's a big one. So that's a question I get often. So she was saying, how do we like make sense of this hadith of I am what my servant thinks of me with the saying of Allah tests those whom he loves, right? This is a big one. And I think when people go through a lot of pain and they don't see, they already haven't, been nourishing that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala where they see his love for them. It's very easy to say, and I've heard people say this in my work, where they'll say, if that's love, I don't want it. Yeah. And people can get into that dark place, right? And this is why I think it's important to not wait until we go through difficulty to begin nurturing the love between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very hard to snap our heart and say, feel now, experience something now, feel Allah's love now. This is, you can't wait until you're in difficulty or difficult times. But let's break that down. Allah tests those whom he loves, right? What are your thoughts? Let me first hear from you guys. What do you guys think about that? What comes up for you when you hear that statement?
I think of the prophets, how they were really tested, but it was a way to for them to be elevated.
Right, absolutely. Anybody else? Yes.
The men who on the boat who killed
Did you say Khidr?
Killed.
Oh, from Musa, right? Yeah.
The men who owned that boat,
Mm-hmm.
which they used to make their documents.
Right. So believing in what we don't see.
There's a scuttle, put a hole in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that when we look at what do tests do essentially for a person, right? So this saying of Allah tests those whom he loves. Okay, then what is it about tests that would be a means to showing me Allah loves me? Then I have to assess, what does the test offer me? That's the question, right? It's through tests, Allah shows his love. Then there must be something in tests. There must be something that tests offer me that express that love to me. Tests bring out truth. There are things you would never be able to discover or to benefit from in times of ease. Allah could leave us in ease, and he does that for people who have chosen the dunya. He leaves them. And this is why people have this struggle. They say, well, I see so-and-so, doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't, they'll say all these things, right? Doesn't practice, and they'll say, we have to actually be careful of that, because for people who Allah does not see hope in, he gives them the dunya. So here, enjoy it. Enjoy it for a temporary time. But essentially, without tests, we would have no reason to actually grow. We would have no reason to assess the truths that we've been living by. We would have no reason to actually evaluate ourselves, our lives. So there are things that, and I'll do a Q&A at the end, inshallah. So hold on to your questions. So there are things that we would never be able to discover about ourselves without discomfort. And this is the reality. And if you need any proof of that, right? As our sister mentioned, nobody was tested more than the Prophets alayhim salam. But nobody's also more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like the Prophets. Even when you study seerah, I remember my teacher asking, why is it that every time Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a caretaker, that caretaker was taken away. You know, he was born into a society without his father. And then he lost his mother. Then he was given to, well, first he was taken to Halima, which he spent some time away from his mother, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he was brought back, and he only had a short time with his mother. Then he lost his mother. And then afterwards, he went to his grandfather, and then his grandfather passed away. And then eventually he went to his uncle. But so much loss so early on in his life. And my teacher, he asked, you know, why is it that every time he had a caretaker, that caretaker was taken away? In Arabic, we use the word Rabb. When we talk about parents, the caretakers of the home, we say Rabb al-Bayt. So in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to himself as Ilah, it's usually in relation to worship, the one you worship, okay? But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word Rabb to refer to himself, it's usually to express caretaking qualities. The master, the guardian, the caretaker, the one who raises you, the one who guides you, right? So many, it's a broader term. And my teacher, I remember him saying that when the Prophet ﷺ didn't have his caretakers, who became his direct Rabb? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the path that Allah designed. And there's no one closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To the point that when he was given the choice between staying in this dunya and being with Allah, who did he choose? What did he choose? Right? He chose to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's love. That's closeness. That's everything you put me through was for me to experience you, for me to love you, for me to be close to you, for me to know you. For this heart to be connected, it was made for Allah, by Allah, for it to know its creator. And there's nothing as rewarding as that. There's nothing as beneficial as that. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was guaranteed Jannah, but he would get up in the middle of the night and he would pray for long, long hours. And when he was asked about this, why he does this when he's guaranteed Jannah, what was his response? Shouldn't I be a grateful servant? Because gratitude is an ingredient of love. When you love someone, you appreciate them. You appreciate their presence in your life. You appreciate their goodness. So even he was given Jannah, he would get up to show up just to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we go back to that phrase of Allah tests those whom He loves, you will not experience it if you look at the test as something that is there to take away from you. If you look at the test as there to rob you from something, to hurt you, to take away anything from you that is dear to you. But if you look at it as it's there to help me grow, it's there to help me thrive, it's there to help me let go of what is false. This is huge, by the way. I know from my work as a therapist that only in struggle do people actually assess the false layers they've been carrying. Only in their toughest times do they begin to evaluate, what are my beliefs? What are my values? What do I actually stand for? What is true about me and what is not true about me? Because you see, throughout your life, you go through experiences and you're constantly interpreting what you're going through. And you're making meaning out, you're deriving meaning out of it. But for many of us, those interpretations are false. You interpret something about Allah in the wrong way. You interpret things about yourself. Maybe you have carried all these false beliefs about who you are. That you're not good enough, that you're not worthy of love, that you're not deserving of this, that you're not, lovable, that you're not, all these negative things that you could be carrying about yourself. And then a struggle happens. You realize you're triggered by things. You realize that you're not at peace. You start doing that work and you start to see all the pieces that you've been carrying. Wow, I've been carrying that piece. That doesn't belong to me. That doesn't serve my path in this world. That doesn't serve my akhirah. That doesn't serve my destination. Wow, why have I been carrying this? I'm not responsible for this. I need to put this down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not ask me to carry this. He did not make me responsible for carrying this. But you would never do that in times of ease. Why would you have a reason to? Why would you take the time to evaluate all of these things if things are going smoothly? Because when things are going smoothly outside of us, we think everything's okay. But there are so many people going through times of ease, and they're most definitely not okay. They're just living in the illusion of falsehood, thinking that that's okay. And you see this, right? And you see this more when you start doing the work on yourself. Where things now that you're not okay with, you see many people that are okay with it. And that's the power of truth. So if you find yourself coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you find yourself becoming more grounded because of this test, if you find yourself becoming more secure in who you are, if you find yourself, enjoying your dhikr with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking to God more, you find yourself taking back your power from people and from things that don't matter to define who you are. If you find yourself now more worthy, but through Allah and not through all the things that were never designed to define your worth, then that's love. That's Allah's love for you. Because He's giving you what truly matters. And He could have left you to be misguided. He could have left you to just be encompassed within what is false. But He didn't. So He throws a test your way. So you can get uncomfortable and start to assess, how have I been living? What are the beliefs that have been driving my actions, my behaviors, my unhealthy reactions, my habits? And then you start to change those things. If you find yourself, going through the struggle of growing and actually going through the pain of growth, that is far better than the greater pain of never growing and never healing. So never ever equate pain and struggle with Allah's lack of love for you. Because many people don't choose the pain of now, but they're choosing a different pain. They're not choosing the pain of healing. They're not choosing the pain of growth. They're not choosing the pain of doing work on themselves. They're not choosing the pain of sitting with the tests that they go through and assessing and reflecting and evaluating themselves. But when you don't choose the pain of growth, and when you don't choose the pain of healing, when you don't choose the pain or the discomfort of seeking knowledge and improving yourself and working on yourself and getting up to do the hard work that will lead to a better life for you in this world and the next, you don't think that you're not choosing a different kind of pain. We're always choosing pain. But instead of choosing the pain of healing and the pain of growth and the pain of, striving closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're choosing the pain of being distant from Him. You're choosing the greater pain of being disconnected from Him because you get cut off from all that you need. If an infant gets cut off from its mother, it gets cut off from what it needs. If we get cut off from our Creator, the one who created us and our mothers, who fashioned us, who created the world, the heavens, the earth, the universe for us, we will most definitely be cut off from what we need. But you're also choosing the pain of, again, never healing, never growing, of never letting go of the false layers that you've carried that don't belong to you. Things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never wanted you to believe about yourself, or never wanted you to believe about Him, never wanted you to believe about others, because those are things you're walking this earth with too. And if you don't choose the pain of now and working on those things, you're choosing the greater pain of living with those things for much longer. So I hope that answers your question of Allah tests those whom He loves. Tests are there to offer us great things. And this is why we should always be accepting of when Allah gives and when He withholds, that we see His love. Allah is al-Qabid and He is al-Basit. He is the one who constricts, withholds, and sometimes withholds giving you something you've been asking for. But He's also al-Basit, the one who gives abundantly. But when He is al-Basit with me, alhamdulillah. When He is al-Qabid with me, alhamdulillah. because I know that when he withholds, it's for my benefit. Just as a loving parent can withhold certain things from their child, but you know that it's out of love. Can you view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We know from our faith that Allah's love and mercy towards us is far greater than a mother's love and mercy towards her child. So look at the world around us. When a mother withholds certain things like, no, you can't have this, no, you can't do this, it's always rooted in her love for the child. How can we think that when Allah withholds something from us, or when He tests us, that it's not rooted in His love for us? That it's not rooted in Him wanting to give us something far greater. But again, if all you see is this world, then it won't make sense. But if you see the akhirah and where your soul returns to, you always, you just have this greater trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sorry. And you feel it in your heart. You feel it and you know that your path is fully under His control. Because you see beyond this world. Ya Allah, I can't imagine what you're doing for me in the heavens. I can't imagine what you hold for me in the heavens. I can't imagine what awaits for me because I know that my struggles are not in vain. But you have to do that work of nourishing that love between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'll stop here to take some questions. I know you had a question.
When you're talking about why does Allah test those who loves the most, I was going to say it also reminds me of the hadith where Allah said that He would wipe away a line of people who are sinless and replace them with people who are sinful simply because
Right.
they're not asking for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we go through hardship, that's when everything's fine and dandy, you're not going to pray the tahajjud and put your forehead on the floor
Right.
and worship Allah. But when you're going through hardship, that always brings you closer. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you reminded us of that. And another example, and this is, we're always used to viewing the story of Adam alayhi salam as like Allah punished him, so He put him in this world, right? I remember one of my teachers saying that if Allah did not, if Adam didn't make a mistake, he would have only experienced Allah in a certain way, like being that He's the giver and He's giving all of these things. But when he made a mistake, he got to experience Allah being a tawab, the one who accepts his repentance, the one who forgives him. He got to experience Allah's mercy towards him. And that's it's like a different kind of experience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we always view it as, this Adam did this and he got punished. But no, if Adam didn't make that mistake, he also wouldn't have experienced Allah's mercy. So you're right, absolutely. Allah does teach us that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or did I miss any hands during the lecture? Questions? Okay. All right, we'll end here then, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. And I will see you guys next week, inshallah, same time. Jazakumullah khair.
We hope you enjoyed our podcast. If you're inspired by the work that we're doing at the IC and want to help keep it going, subscribe to our podcasts, follow us on social media, donate to help support us at icnyu.org, and most importantly, keep us in your continued du'as. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.